the Wiggly Podcast. Let your iPod bloom.
Hello listener, welcome to Wiggly Podcast number 104. Now, a few slightly different things today. I'm going to be your host, Richard, and I'm going to be joined on the couch. It's a while since I've had you on the couch, by Rachel.
Thank you, Rick. It's very nice to be on the couch with you.
Nice to see you. So why is Hev not here, Rach? Where is she?
Well, Hev's away in the good old US of A again.
Right.
And she's out there at the podcast conference in LA. And she's there meeting people, trying to get out and about there. There's actually farmers markets in LA, and she's off there, yeah.
Good Lord,
so,
Adam and Eve here. So she's having a good time?
She's having a fab time, yeah. We Skyped her yesterday, where Skype is, for those people who don't know, internet phone calling, and it's a lot cheaper. But anyway, we Skyped her yesterday, and she is having a great time out there. She's met up with many people that she already knows from last year, because of course she went last year, and learning loads and loads and loads of stuff. Yeah. She's going to bring it all back and tell us all about it.
Excellent. Has she met any eligible bachelors out there?
Well, has Farmer Phil joined us yet or not?
Phil's eyes have just lit up on the couch.
She didn't mention any.
No, but she wouldn't, would she?
No, she's never going to. But.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting one, because we've had these debates now for a while about Hev's jet-setting all over the place, you know. And admittedly, you know, she has been on a plane once or twice this year. But I went to this composting conference. I know people would find it difficult to believe there is such a thing. And there were a couple of presentations there, some of which were a bit difficult to sit through, as you can imagine. But one was particularly inspiring, a chap called Martin Bacon, who has an organisation up in County Durham, in fact, and he was talking about carbon offsetting. So I had a great chance to speak to him. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to do an interview at the conference, but I Skyped him yesterday.
Great.
And had a superb chat. So he was talking about all these things. Now, interestingly, Karen, who's in the office, that many of the listeners will have heard before, when she joined us originally, she kind of said it was a bit of a lifestyle change for her and whatnot. And she often picks on me, you know.
She has a little dig at you now and then, doesn't she?
Actually, she draws people into the office for maximum effect and tells them where I'm going and how far I'm flying and stuff like this.
That's it.
And interestingly, Martin was saying that out of the group of people that were in front of him when he did his presentation, when he asked who had given up flying, a third of the audience said they had. When he asked who had given up driving, 3 people put their hands up. And the reality is that driving, in many respects, is more environmentally harmful than flying is, you know. And he talks in our little interview about the impacts that certain elements of our behaviour have on carbon emissions.
All right.
But Karen, I believe, isn't she buying your 4-wheel drive as well?
Thanks, Rich, for that. Well, she's interested in it, I must say.
Yeah,
she's interested in our 4x4 to collect the wood for her wood burner.
Right.
So that's what it's for.
Okay. So that's interesting.
Yes.
So she's reducing her burning fossil fuel emissions by collecting firewood, but she's increasing her carbon emissions by driving around in a very uneconomical 4x4.
Rich, I have kept quiet this long while I have listened to this diatribe.
Yeah.
The first extremely salient comment I have to make is that there seems to be a complete dearth of eligible damsels or otherwise around this area, so whatever Hev's up to in LA, there's not much action here. And the other thing I was going to say, and I was thinking about this the other day, was listening to you banging on about 4x4s and all the rest of it, and the papers are full of Chelsea tractors and all the rest of it.
Yeah, sure.
But it is an interesting thing that if you look at carbon emissions, fuel efficiency of cars in general, so include 4x4s, the fact that they're 4x4s actually has very little impact. You either drive a vehicle which is economic, or you drive a vehicle which uses loads of fuel. And there are lots of 4x4s which are far more frugal than your average car. And it's an interesting...
Sure.
Yeah, I am.
It's not
absolutely,
a
because
convenient argument.
I don't think that would be
pickup,
our Daihatsu. It's a bit smoking.
My pickup uses less fuel than Heather's Mini used to.
Really?
MPG.
Right.
So that there's a good example.
Is that
You've
because
got
of the speed they used to drive it, though?
Well, it might have had something to do with it, but the point is that efficiency isn't just down to whether it's a 4x4 or a car. It's how efficient the engine is and how much effort the manufacturer has made to actually get the efficient use of the fuel. So that whilst I agree that using your 4x4 in London is hardly a great point, just the fact that it's a 4x4 doesn't necessarily make it any more or less fuel efficient than some other less obvious candidates.
Okay.
And I would just like to make that point before you go off on one.
All right, Phil. Well, I'm not completely convinced by your argument.
Well, go and look at the figures, Rich. They're all available on the internet. Every car now has to have a carbon emissions figure that goes with it in grams of carbon per litre of fuel or whatever.
Okay.
And if you look at those figures, some 4x4s are horrendous. I completely grant you that, and there's no issues with that. But just because it's a four-wheel drive truck-type vehicle doesn't make it a fuel nightmare. There are plenty of cars which are at least as bad and many that are worse.
Okay. Well, let's go over and listen to what Martin has to say anyway, and also some of the interesting facts he's made about calculating our carbon footprint. Hello, Martin. How are you?
Very good.
Good. We met briefly at the Community Composting Network conference a couple of weeks ago. I know many of the listeners will be surprised to hear that there is such a thing as a Community Composting Network conference, but nonetheless there was, and there were some great presentations there, one of which was yours. I was particularly inspired by some of the stuff you were saying about carbon offsetting. And what is it that you do exactly, though?
I run a community composting group in Teesdale in County Durham.
Right.
Primarily we're a conservation group, so we do everything conservation-wise, coppicing, tree planting. We actually have 20 acres of our own woodland.
Oh, fantastic.
And a fantastic site.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what do you do with your woodland? Kind of coppicing and things like that?
Yeah, we manage it on a coppice rotation, and we use it as an example of how a woodland can be productive.
Right.
And give something back, but also give to nature as well.
Right, okay. When you did your presentation, you mentioned then that you've had a great deal of experience in forestry. In fact, it is your field in many respects. And you talked about carbon offsetting. You talked about your experiences with various companies, the kind of service they provide to give people the opportunity to offset things like flights. And really, in many respects, you sort of dished the dirt on those companies.
In a way, yes. This all arose from when I was on holiday a year ago, and I saw a piece on telly about CO2 production in the UK.
Right.
And when they were talking about this, they were talking about whether the government were going to tax it or whether people should just offset.
Right.
Now, to me, I thought, well, this would be great for the community sector if they could actually get some funds in to do some of the work they do, and if it could also offset carbon that people are producing from their holiday flights, etc., from their travel, that would be great. There's a lot of companies set up. Some of them are charitable, some of them are not-for-profit, and there are commercial companies out there as well that are taking people's money and promising offset, which I find amazing, really. So I've spent the last year actually researching this, and as you know from my presentation, came up with some interesting findings.
Absolutely. Now you used a calculation to come up with the conclusions that you did, which presumably is available to the layman. It's interesting, really. You were just giving us the lowdown, which is something that we could all find out for ourselves if we wanted to.
That's it. Yeah. The one hard thing is, I've been on sites in the past and looked at carbon offset, and until I actually came to do this research myself, and I wanted to make sure, the idea was that us as a community group were going to set up a carbon offset site. When I was on holiday, I bought the domain name, I came back and I set myself away with the research, and
wow.
And what I found when I went onto it, I looked at 5 different sites and I looked at one trip. London Heathrow to Orlando, Florida, 8,646 miles return trip. And when I looked at it, I looked at 5 different websites and they all came up with different things.
That's kind of strange, isn't it? Because you'd imagine that in order to be accurate, then they should all come up with the same thing at the very least.
Well, I know building a website's hard enough. You would have thought that they would have got the their CO2 calculator correct. I mean, I had such things. I mean, they all say that you're going to produce so many kilograms of CO2, and it ranged from 3,300 right down to 1,200 kilos, which to me there's quite a lot of difference there, you know.
Big discrepancies there between the two. Your calculation, what did you come up with then?
Well, in the end, I really researched hard and had to go through many websites. Not my favourite pastime. But you and I both. So I went through many of the websites, and one of the best websites was the Heathrow website and the DEFRA website, and basically they came up with a simple calculation, and basically what it's to do with is specific gravity of fuel. So if you're using LPG, unleaded fuel or aviation fuel or diesel fuel, it's all got a different specific gravity, and then there's a simple calculation of that.
Right.
And there was only one of the websites that came close to that.
Okay.
And they said I would produce 2,510 kilograms of CO2.
Right.
Their remit for this was that you would have to plant 2 oak trees to actually offset this.
Right.
That's when I struggled. The problem is that they would suggest that you plant 2 oak trees, but these oak trees would take 100 years to take in that 2,500 kilos of CO2.
Okay.
Now, if you have a holiday every year, you know
it's not a viable option, is it?
No, you can't take from the environment and not give back straight away.
No.
It's a problem.
How many trees did you calculate that you would need to offset a holiday flight like that?
If you wanted to offset that one flight, you would have to plant 155 trees.
Right, okay.
So, you know, that would be a cost of about £1,550, and land usage 1 acre.
Right.
Right.
So for most people, there's absolutely no way that they would either have that amount of space available to them, but they equally would be not really prepared to spend 1,500 quid on offsetting a holiday which probably cost 400 quid.
Absolutely. And when it comes down to it, if you look at the amount of flights from Heathrow in 1 week, you would need more land than Britain can provide, and that's just in 1 week.
Of course.
So offsetting with tree planting isn't a viable option.
No, it's not. It's not at all. And I mean, I guess it's something that it's quite nice to do. Planting trees is great, and we've often thought about ways of offsetting our carbon emissions, you know, trying to do something, but not doing something for face value, not just simply ringing a company up and saying, yeah, you know, here's 15 quid, plant a couple of trees and that's cleared my guilty conscience, or equally sponsoring another company to plant a wildflower meadow or something like that. These are things that we do anyway, and that we encourage people to do. So it's a shame to, you know, just to have that kind of superficial impact of just offering money to other organisations to do something, and because it's not making a difference, is it, at all?
Well, that's it. And one of the real problems is if you say to somebody, I'm going to offset it, you know, they go away with a clear conscience thinking, I can go on that trip and I'll have another 3 trips this year or whatever. There's so many more things that we can do. Tree planting is just one thing that they're suggesting. To me, as a conservationist, tree planting was the only thing I could come up with that would actually physically offset. But obviously there's a lot more things out there. There's all sorts of things, from fitting solar ovens into houses in Africa, which really isn't offset. It's a social issue. It's not offsetting carbon as such. But there's all sorts of weird and wonderful things that you can offset. Biofuels is one for all your staff cars or your transportation that you use. There are distributors now you can buy 100% biofuel, whether it's ethanol or whether it's biodiesel, which is 80% less emissions, at least 80%. Well, after looking at all this, I only came up with one thing that you can actually offset, and that's education. You know, education is probably one of the best.
Sure.
I don't think I could set up a website and get people to give us money to educate people. They just wouldn't believe that. But in reality, you know, if we educate people, it can work so much better. When we actually look at the statistics of CO2 production, industry creates 26%. Household 25%, road transport 24%. So household and road transport are half of the CO2 production in this country. So if we walk our kids to school, if we bike to work, if we change to energy-saving light bulbs in the house, just small things like that can make a bigger impact. And aviation is only 6%.
God.
So it's incredible. I think aviation's always picked on because it's a very easy target. It's something that people can say it's a luxury.
Yes, yes.
But we have many luxuries in the house, just leaving things on standby. We can change them a lot easier.
Absolutely. I mean, it was something, and of course it was something that you and I were chatting about earlier on, really. Flying isn't the be-all and end-all. There are many things like insulating your home, for instance. But isn't that a relatively sort of inexpensive way of lowering your carbon footprint significantly?
Absolutely. There's loads of things can be done in the home. I mean, you can look at the different heating technologies now. Wood pellets, wood chips available for the home. If your boiler's getting old, you could make a real change there.
Right.
There's all sorts of things you can do. Well, like Tony Blair said, he's very reluctant to give up his summer holiday. And so am I. I'm an environmentalist, but I would be reluctant to give it up. But when it comes to holidays, it's instead of having 4 holidays a year, just have one. Make it for 4 weeks, There are different things that we can do, and you can pick the greener airlines if there is such a thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a whole different ground altogether there. Another thing that was really, really interested me is that you said some of these companies that offer people the opportunity to offset their carbon emissions through flying, for instance, in some instances have destroyed ancient existing environments in order to accommodate new tree planting schemes, which seems utterly bananas.
That's it. I mean, they are tearing up uplands and things like this to just plant trees. Obviously there's no planning permission requirements for planting a tree, so we can plant trees wherever we want, but we do have to be careful. There are habitats there already, which we do need to protect, and we have to be sensible. Like we said, if we're going to cover the whole of Britain, we can't do that. We've got to do it delicately.
You're completely right. I mean, for the listeners' benefit, is there any way that people can get in touch with you? Or can they go to your website or give you a ring or something?
Absolutely, yeah. They can get in touch with us by email, which is rotterscomposting@yahoo.co.uk, or they can even phone us, and that's 01833 690022.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for speaking to me, Martin, and our paths will cross again, no doubt.
Hopefully. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Well, I think that's a wrap, guys.
Yeah, brilliant.
So until next week, it's bye from me.
Yeah, and it's goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Bye-bye.